So today we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is I'm actually going to look it up. Pretty old movie, 1966, which is pretty much what I guessed. I was going to guess like early 1960s, but whatever. We ended up watching it on Discord, which was cool. Gimbal, Axlav, Cuddle Bunny, me, and maybe one other person I'm forgetting. But yeah, didn't realize how long it was, first of all. If you guys haven't watched it or have no idea as to what it is, it's a spaghetti western, which is a western that was Italian. And it's one of the like most famous ones, but it is part of a trilogy, and isn't, maybe the most famous spaghetti western. It's not the most famous western either, but certainly one of the most famous. It's the one that I immediately go to, and it's the one that like everyone mimics, like all the sounds and music in that, the bow wow wow, like that's that movie, which man got kind of old real fast, tell you what. But it's 3 hours, like literally. It's like 2 hours and 58 minutes, okay? Like there's no, oh, it was trailers. No, oh, the credits were 10 minutes long. Like, no, it's actually that long. Oh, yeah, that's a long movie. And I guess this is still coming from a time where like having longer movies was still, I suppose, acceptable. At some point, I don't know when, but movies all agree that you shouldn't be over 2.5 hours, probably not over 2. And then many movies are more around an hour and a half to 2 hours. If they ever run over 2 hours, it's usually like newsworthy. And by newsworthy, I mean like, movie fans all are like, wow, I can't believe they got permission to do that and all that. Intermission is just a thing of the past. But this is definitely a movie you want to have an intermission with. 3 hours is a long time. And not only is it a long time in general to just sit and watch something, it's also long because it is a slower pace. We are talking about a movie from the 60s. Everything gets slower the farther you go back. And not necessarily because of like technological impairments or something like that. Like, no, they actually just that's what they preferred. So talk to someone who's into old movies, they have a common criticism of new movies. Honestly, a decent common criticism of new movies is that they're way too fast. Like, I remember when the Batman movie, the first one with Christian Bale, came out, and people were like, this is a great movie, this is great. And it was good, but fuck, those action scenes made no sense. It's just so fast and convoluted, and you can definitely see their point. This is going back. This is going to be slow. It's got the pacing of like A Gone with the Wind, if any of you have seen that. Personally, I never liked that movie. My mom loves it, but that movie I do not think ages well, and I hesitate to believe it was actually that enjoyable when it came out, but apparently it was. So, all right. Apparently it's true of books too. Sentences used to be longer. I've read a fair amount of older books. I never really noticed. But I guess you're right. I guess I didn't know what to attribute it to, but I guess you're right. Like, if I'm comparing like Heart of Darkness to like the Stormlight Archives, like obviously very different genres, but yeah, I guess slower is the term. I don't know, but then all like I guess I'm like a little less on board that. I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why I don't feel it as much for books as you do with movies, but regardless, it makes sense. It makes sense. Intermission refill whiskey. Yeah, needed. Yeah. Man, the sound effects of those old-timey movies, like, those are, it, like, funnily enough, okay, like, if you're gonna want to just, like, continue to watch the 3-hour movie, One, you don't really have to like pay super close attention. There are a decent amount of scenes that show something without dialogue, so like you will miss out on some things if you just never pay attention. But, you only have like a headset on. But for the most part, there are a lot of scenes that just appropriately use like long pauses or close-ups or something like that to emphasize a point. So it is a movie that you can kind of like do other stuff with. But one thing is that it has like pretty good ASMR. And I'm a person who's not like into that at all. But I just like really appreciated the sound effects. Actually, speaking of sound effects, this happens with old movies, but I feel like I've watched like half a dozen old movies at least, right? Within a recent time that I can remember them. Because maybe I watched a ton when I was like 6 and my mom was watching them. But I feel like this one had the most egregious like misuse of I actually can't think of the word right now. Voiceover. Oh, no. Not dubbing. There's another word for it. ADR. There you go. Acronym for it, actually. ADR. Like, the ADR for this film just felt terrible. Now, it's not dubbing. Dubbing would be, I mean, maybe, like, by definition, it can fit the same. But dubbing is usually as in I dub a Japanese movie. No, ADR is when they go back over a scene and redo the same exact lines in the same exact way they said them, but the mics that they're using on camera for the actual acting of the scene aren't good enough or just get a lot of other info picked up. All the explosions going around and shit, so they have to go back over it. The audio was really off. Like, I feel like most of the time, you're almost, like, better off not watching some of the intense dialogue scenes because you would just notice that it was half a second off, which you should know is, like, a really big deal when it comes to matching voice to audio to video. If it's, like, 0.01 seconds off, you can kind of get over it. But, like, a full half a second, it always looked like it was off. And I feel like that's not actually always the case for these older movies before anyone comes in and is like, that's just what older movies do. Like, I don't think that's true. I know Gone with the Wind did the same thing, and there was occasionally some moments where I was like, okay, that's obviously not one. That's not picked up exactly when he said that. But I feel like it was just not as noticeable. And before anyone blames the close-ups are usually on the eyes anyway. You go to the mutation today? Yeah, that's what co-op later means. So the entire thing must have been like ADR, which is actually a little surprising too, because there's plenty of moments where like nothing else is happening except dialogue. But that's one thing that I can kind of complain about. The other thing I would complain about is definitely some of the slower scenes where like things are kind of overemphasized. I definitely came into watching this movie with a different expectation than what I actually ended up seeing. But one of the things that this movie does is actually heavily criticize war, basically. It's actually like an anti-war, make fun of super violent people type movie. And a couple of times it just was like beating me over the head with it. Which maybe is important. Maybe that's like actually, he had to, because I think, and it's funny actually, is that Clint Eastwood is actually like one of the guys who does this really stupid thing. But there are plenty of people, especially back in the 60s, who are like, men are men, macho, war, great, guns good, shit like that, I suppose. But like, I just felt like it was a little bit too much, because some of the long scenes are about the war. And it's just like, oh, okay. Even something small, like when the would-be Confederate cavalry is like riding up to them. That's the word. Riding up to them, and the guy is like, "Are they Confederates or are they Union?" And they think they're Confederates, but they're actually not. It's kind of funny. Like the scene itself took like, I don't know, like 30 seconds for them to be like, "Oh, they're Confederates," and the guy just like starts cheering for them, like overzealous and kind of in a funny way. He doesn't even remember who like General Lee is. And then finally they come up, and I was like, that lasted so long. He cheered for so long. There's just like some moments there that I was just, I know they could have reduced this movie by like 20%, just like little bits here and there, and it still would have been fine. It could have been 2.5 hours easy and not felt as dragged on or as like, did you guys understand? Did you guys understand? Did you guys understand? Civil War's bad. Did you guys understand? Do you understand? I had the same complaint about Parasite, actually. I didn't think Parasite was as cool or great of a movie as people said. But that also was like, especially when you go in with the knowledge that it's about like class. Parasite was just like, do you understand what the difference is between the people that are working and the people who have their lofty life? Do you understand? It's just like, oh my god. So maybe I'm just obnoxious about that. I don't know. 1 second. It's getting warm. Hello. Zombie grub cut. Yeah, maybe I should make my own cut. Could use more close-ups, people's eyes die during a dialogue. Yeah. I mean, that is the style that he wanted to go for. And that also, like, you kind of have to lean in a little bit. I think everyone knows that. Like, if you're gonna go watch a movie from the 60s or a cowboy movie and just be like, I don't know, this better meet my expectations, like in the way that the Avengers did or something like that. Like, okay, you're just not gonna have a good time. So there's always a little bit of leaning in, and also trying to remember that some of these things were actually like novel concepts or unique at the time when they were used. But yeah, that the close-up on the eyes got to like a point where I mean, I'm surprised people in the 60s didn't meme on it more, you know? Like, I think it was kind of a running joke from then on, even in movies from like the later 60s or the 70s, but just like, it's like, okay, gotcha. But on to the good things. So I talked about the sound effects, which, I mean, there's credit due to the sound effect artists, the Foley artists who work in movies, and that's usually underrepresented, underappreciated. So I'm not going to say that it's, you know, useless or that it's as expected, because it was actually quite good. So that was good. But then on the overarching things, like actually the overall movie I quite liked. Haven't watched many westerns, not really into like the western theme. Steampunk never really interested me. I watched Firefly and thought that it was super overrated. It was just an okay show. I can understand why it was canceled. No like western animes, not even like samurai stuff, which also like a lot of westerns have inspiration from. Never watched that. So I didn't really know if I was gonna like this, but I actually quite liked it. Am I gonna watch it again? Probably not. Am I gonna watch the sequels? Maybe, if they're on Netflix, which I think they are. But I actually did like it. As I said, I went into it with a different expectation. I thought this was gonna be a lot more shoot 'em up, just like enjoy cowboys tearing each other apart, bounty hunters and villains, but it was very different than that. It was actually a lot of different stories, which is also part of the 3-hour runtime, is that they have a lot of things that have to be explained, and then everything has to meet up, and then everything has to diverge. And it was actually, like, in that way, a complicated or complex story. I don't say complicated, because it's not hard to follow, but it's complex. It is such a cultural cornerstone, and that's one reason I wanted to watch it, as well as diversifying the genres of this movie club. So I was even saying that I would like to do a documentary perhaps next, but I'm not sure which one. I know people are going to suggest the tiger one, but I was thinking something else. You didn't like Firefly. I said it was okay. I feel like it probably hit the right notes for a lot of people, which explains why it's a cult favorite that eventually became a general favorite as more people finally got introduced, but I totally understand. Same reason I understand why Arrested Development was canceled, even though I love Arrested Development. Cool, I'm gonna try esports documentary, only if there's a really, really good one. I mean, the Smash one I never actually watched, and that's probably the one that everyone points to. So maybe. But anyways, I closed Mystery Pop on Twitch. They are? Anyways, so it was complex. It was not just in storytelling, but also in the characters. Even though all the characters are, yeah, they're archetypes, I guess maybe is the right word there. But they actually are all pretty interesting. Good God, like the two main. Well, I mean, there's three main characters really. The good and the bad had amazing voices. Like, Clint Eastwood was a good-looking guy, but his voice was just amazing. Same with the bad. I don't know his actor. But his voice was fantastic. And then the ugly was just a really good actor. I wasn't surprised to learn this, but I was convinced that he, like, the actor was actually Hispanic. Nope. Italian, Jewish born, classically trained actor who didn't initially want to like really work with this director, but then watched one of his movies and was like, yeah, let's do it. And he did a fantastic job. Provided that little bit of humor into it. You do kind of have to ignore that all of the things he did to be the ugly are terrible, terrible things, but he's actually a good part of the movie. But yeah, the other two guys had amazing voices. But yeah, they even had like their own little bit of complexity. I mean, the good is labeled as the good, but he's actually not that good of a guy. They're all kind of terrible. The bad got enough moments to be like interested in him. He starts off the movie as well, which always helps with a bit of like air of mystery and, you know, justice porn when he finally dies type thing. But the first scene with the ugly, I thought he would just be kind of a throwaway comedic character. But you even actually learn about his family and his past. The one on Mike Ross, I have no idea who that is. Good is a relative term. Yeah, relative to the other guys, he was pretty good. I did appreciate that it had a lot of commentary on like anti-war. Again, you go into a Western, you think it's just going to be like a glorification, or at the very least just appealing to the audience that was there at that time. But no, I mean, there was plenty of gunfights that were fun enough to watch, but there was a lot of just like war is bad. There's also historical events that are tied into it, which always makes things a little bit more interesting for me. It's all well and good to be like pure fantasy in a realistic setting, but like there was actually an expedition into New Mexico. There was actually battles there, and I learned a lot about the Civil War living where I do, but mostly about the East Coast Civil War, because that's honestly where most of the important things happened. But I had no idea that it went out that far west. You know, you watch a Western or anything that alludes to a Western, you know the Civil War was happening during a similar time, the stereotypical West that we think of, the Old West. But it very rarely bleeds into the actual setting, except for like, yeah, a guy who has his legs blown off, or a guy who has an eye patch, or a guy who escaped from, deserted the army. Like, you don't actually see the armies moving through, and like the imprisonment, the prisoner camps and all that. So that was actually really interesting. I didn't go into any more detail, but I could have. Wikipedia article for The Good, Bad, and the Ugly is actually quite long. There's a lot of like development issues that happened which are interesting to read about, and then they actually go into a bit of the historical context of the movie. So I don't know if like the bridge thing was really important to the actual Civil War out there, but maybe it was. I don't know. The Captain Dude in the bridge fight sequence, I want short films about them. That's the sign of a good movie, right? Is that they can create a character who is interesting, who doesn't necessarily super impact the movie. You even feel kind of bad when he dies. He died, right? He certainly got injured, and injuries in the Civil War often led to death. You feel bad for him. He was an endearing character. But even the, I assume she was a prostitute. I don't know though. The chick who gave up where what's his face was, the guy with one eye, in like very beginning of the movie, close to it. Even she seemed to be like well chosen and good acting. I don't know what made me think of it. Maybe because she's like literally the only woman in the movie, so I paid more attention to it. But I just was like, I really expected it to be like the most throwaway, just like, I don't care about this chick. But I guess something like they made, like maybe her costume or the way they directed her concern or that. I mean, anytime. So there's another complaint that I have, but it's definitely just because it's an old movie, is that so the fight scenes, the actual fighting with like punching, are so comically bad. Like, not only are they clearly not punching the person, like at one point Clint Eastwood's character like slaps the ugly, and his slap, he kind of like looks like he's not gonna do it, and then he does it, which is fine, but he does it like, I don't know if I can like maybe like replicate it, but he's kind of like, and it's just it there's clearly no impact. If there was an impact, it's like, why'd you do that? But then like the ugly like falls down, you're like, it's clear there was no follow through with that slap. I don't understand. So when the woman was getting slapped, I also was just kind of like, good thing that the scene set up and the actors are doing their job, because yeah, the actual slapping does not look real at all. The original series Star Trek vibes from the fights, yeah, actually, absolutely. But you could always say that Star Trek was just, low budget. Yeah, they just apparently was just like universally bad back then. Pre-Bruce Lee cinema fights not quite the same. That's a good point. Bruce Lee would have been getting involved soon after this, right? The early 70s? Might just pass out drunk. Well, he's definitely injured. Whiskey cures gangrene, he'd be fine. Well, more people would have survived the Civil War if that were true. There is the beautiful moment with the kitten. The entire scene after the bridge is blown up and they survey the wasteland of bodies after the fight was one of the longer ones that was kind of like, we get it, but it was well done. It was somber and touching, and he like sees a Union soldier, I think, and covers them, and you get the impression that the good actually is good. So that by the time you get to the ending, when it's like, he won't actually leave the ugly, will he? And he comes back and you're like, of course he doesn't, because he's comparatively pretty good. Yeah, he helps someone who's dying, and then he pets a goddamn kitten. So clearly this guy is the good guy. When it's moments like that that really just added to the character, who is literally nameless. The other two guys have names. I just don't remember them. But his name is Blondie, and he never gets a name in the trilogy. Man with no name is his name. I thought Blondie was a very appropriate name. I actually really like the nickname. And the dynamics between the ugly and the good were quite fun to watch. What else? Tuco and Angel Eyes. I remembered Angel Eyes, but didn't he have like an actual name? I thought he did. I thought he might, but anyways. So it's a movie worth watching. there's a lot of cool scenes. There's a lot of like, hi, I had no idea this happened. They get into a prisoner camp. They like try and kill each other basically, and it's very drawn out, but it's really important. Like you really are just like, like obviously not John Wayne. Well, I've been saying his name this entire time. Clint Eastwood. Like obviously Clint Eastwood's character doesn't die, but he's like literally stuck in the desert, handcuffed, and it's like shit. Like how does he get out of this one? And the way that they did dehydration, I feel like it must be overdone, but on the other hand, like dehydration and sun poisoning are like actual killers. So I was gonna say like Clint Eastwood probably would have died a while before the carriage rolled in, but whatever. But the way that they added the prosthetics and makeup and stuff to their face, and I feel like it's overdone. Like I'm tempted to Google what it would look like to be out in the desert with no water for 2 days, and nothing to shade you. But I don't want to have that in my image search. So I'm gonna assume that it's a little overdone, but it is one thing that I noticed. Like it's very painfully obvious when it's happening in the desert, but even Tuco, when he gets back from the desert and drinks, like he still has like really, really chapped lips. And I was wondering if it's either just like good makeup or they actually like stop drinking. Because that looked a little more realistic, like really severely chapped lips. I've seen that. Yeah, exactly. I think I'll pass on knowing what that looks like. Yeah. The actors, as I already like complimented Tuco, were all very good, and not just because they had the deep voice. If anything, maybe it's because of like expectations, it being Clint Eastwood and him being the main character and all that. If anything, like he might have been like the quote unquote worst actor, but I don't think it's necessarily that he's a worst actor. It's just that I was personally more intrigued by the bad, and then the ugly had so many moments to shine with his acting. Clint Eastwood's character was very much so the stoic, like always cool under pressure, doesn't do very much, which I don't know, it feels like it's tough to leave an impression, especially because he really is sharing like a third of the movie with everyone else. I think it's maybe different in the sequels. I don't know, but it's a good thing they gave him some of those like tender moments, because otherwise it was just like, oh yeah, he's there, he's cool. Yep, that's kind of what you think about him. He's just like, yeah, he's really cool. Is it Keanu Reeves in The Matrix? Maybe, yeah. Which, I love Keanu Reeves, but yeah, I was never really impressed with him in The Matrix. I wasn't like, wow, if anyone else did this, this would be ruined. No. Yeah, that's a good comparison. So it's clearly good. Soundtrack got a little repetitive, especially because it's so iconic. And to the point where it's been, a running joke in a lot of movies. The soundtrack and the twangs got overused in a 3-hour movie that's 40 plus years old. What else was there? I think something I would like to see improved. I mean, I don't know about improving anything. It felt very much so like just a movie that I enjoyed, and I'm glad I had the cultural experience, but I'm not really going to think a ton about that movie, and I'm not going to be like feeling strongly about it, because the one thing you can say about like heavy criticisms, if there's heavy criticism, you're at least thinking about the movie. If you love everything about it, then also that's, thinking a lot about the movie. And then there's the weird scenarios where you love certain things and hate certain things. And that's also thinking a lot about it. But when things just kind of like hit you like okay, it just kind of glides off. And that movie probably will do that for me. There's probably going to be another Western movie out there that's gonna like hit me more. And I'd be like, I love when this thing happened, but this thing just really was like not done well and should have been this or that or the other. I'm thinking of like a Marriage Story, which was a movie club movie a couple weeks ago, when there was a lot of things that I really, really liked, and there was like one or two things that I just was like, but this could have been better. But I think about that movie a ton. Don't really think about spaghetti western. Just more of the historical impact. Like, I learned what a spaghetti western was. I learned what the stereotype is. I finally seen a movie that everyone talks about. Although, to be fair, not everyone really talks about this movie so much as they reference it, even unknowingly. The Bow Wow Wow song is basically just cowboys. It's basically just West. How much the good, the bad, and the weird? I mean, I might eventually. I'm actually really more interested in watching like a samurai movie to continue exploring that avenue. Hello. Yeah, I like Seven Samurai or Yojimbo. I don't think it'd be next on Movie Club, but maybe eventually it'll be on there. Oh. I'm trying to think of other things that really hit me about the movie. The outcome was expected, but not in like a terrible way. And I feel like I'm missing something that I wanted to talk about when I was watching it. I don't know. I think it kind of wraps it up. It's a good movie, but while it's not necessarily forgettable because there are so many iconic moments in there, it's not something that I'm going to think a lot about. It's more complex than you might think. So if you're going in there just expecting like a shoot 'em up, it's actually really not that. And plan on taking a break about halfway through. But if you are interested in like what's the word, like diversifying and like trying new things, like trying a western, a spaghetti western or anything like that is, I think, really important. It's one of those, like, it's a gateway, right? This is a gateway drug. It's iconic, it's worth watching, but it's probably not going to be your favorite one of the genre or the subgenre or whatever. But if it means that you watch something else that kind of like sounds a little more appealing to you personally, then you're probably going to really like that one more. Actually, bringing it back to Parasite, kind of like that. Like, if you're like, wow, that was kind of an okay movie, but I'm more interested in like generally what Korean thrillers are like, can you recommend me something? Like, yeah, Parasite I don't think is actually going to be a lot of people's favorite when they actually start exploring other Korean movies. So this is kind of the same impression I got from this one.